All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. We are about to get started on our public comment hearing in the towing rulemaking proceeding that has been before the commission. Before I get started, I just want to confirm that my court reporter is here and ready to go. Harriet, can you hear me? And are you ready?
Sorry, Alenka. I'm here, but I was having trouble. But we seem to have some feedback.
Oh, are you having trouble hearing me?
I can hear you, but there's an echo.
Okay, well, I'm not on double, so I don't know what.
Harriet's on double, so it might be on her end, Judge.
Okay. All right. Let me know if you have trouble hearing anybody, Harriet, and we will definitely slow down and repeat as necessary to make sure you can hear everybody and everything, okay?
I don't know if it's you two, but it's different.
Okay. Casey, can you say something as well, just to see if Harriet's hearing double when you speak as well?
Sure. Harriet, I think the problem might be you appear to have joined twice. So I've got you in here twice.
I'm not sure what's going on. Here, hold on.
Okay. I'm going to ask everyone for their patience while we make sure the court reporter is ready to go and can hear everybody clearly so that we can have a good record. So we'll get rolling in just
Maybe
a little bit.
I think I'm on twice.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, Casey said you might be on twice.
I'm going to leave.
Okay, we'll wait. Thanks. Let me know when you're back and ready. I want to thank everyone for their patience as we make sure we get all the technology working properly. This technology is wonderful in many, many ways, but you do end up with a few glitches and sometimes things take glitch.
I just found out. Sorry.
Okay. Are you good to go, Harriet?
I'm ready.
All right. Okay, with our court reporter ready, let's get going. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. We are now on the record in the Colorado Public Utility Commission's proceeding number 23R-0085TO. My name is Alenka Hahn, and I am the administrative law judge assigned to this proceeding. It is Thursday, August 31st, 2023 at 11:30 a.m. The scheduled time for this hearing to begin. Oh, for the record, it's 11:34, but we were on at 11:30. This matter comes on for a public comment hearing pursuant to decision number R23-0502-I, dated August 2nd, 2023, which set this hearing for today, August 31st. This public comment hearing is a continuation of the public comment hearings held on April 20th, May 30th, and July 25th, 2023. The April 20th, 2023 hearing was set by Commission Decision number C23-0118, which was issued on February 22nd, 2023. Again, I want to welcome all of you and thank each and every one of you for being here today to provide public comments. I'd like to extend a special welcome to the state legislators who are joining us this morning. It looks as if I see Representative Stephen Woodrow, Senator Julie Gonzalez, and I believe I also saw Representative Andrew Bosenecker. Please tell me if I'm mispronouncing your name. I'm trying not to. The print is very small. Are there any other legislators here today?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, please?
It's Basenecker, like water basin, and then Ecker. Thanks so much for clarifying.
Thank you. I'm going to make a note to myself, Basenecker. So we have 3 legislators here today. Thank you very much for being here. We appreciate your participation this morning very much. Before we get rolling on the public comment portion, though, I do want to make some general comments, just getting the proceeding going and setting the tone for today. Since the July 25th, 2023 public comment hearing, the Commission has received a few written comments and suggested language from the Office of the Attorney General, Consumer Protection Section, as well as 2 individuals who described their towing experiences. And also just this morning, we received a letter jointly signed by several legislators. I want everyone to rest assured that those comments have been made part of the record and will all be taken into consideration. I have reviewed all of the written comments, but I'm not prepared to make comments about them today, but I am prepared to listen to any additional public comments anyone wishes to make today. Before we begin the public comment portion of today's hearing, I would like to make some general comments about this proceeding. Some of the following information will be repetitive for those of you who have participated in the April 20th, May 30th, or July 25th public comment hearings. However, I nonetheless ask that you please pay close attention to my statements so that you will be well informed about how today's hearing will proceed. Let me first explain the purpose of today's public comment hearing. The purpose of this public comment hearing is to allow members of the public to provide comments regarding proposed modifications to the Commission's existing rules governing towing carriers. This proceeding was initiated primarily for the purpose of implementing Colorado House Bill 22-1314, which has now been codified in the Colorado Revised Statutes in Title 40, Article 10.1, and in Title 42, Article 4. These amendments significantly amended the statutes governing towing carriers and went into effect on August 10th, 2022. The amendments to the towing statutes included new operational standards for towing carriers engaged in non-consensual tows originating from residential private properties, including a new 24-hour notice requirement, a prohibition against towing carriers acting as authorized agents for private property owners, an obligation for towing carriers to release towed motor vehicles without full payment to the authorized operator of the towing vehicle, and a restriction on towing carriers applying a drop fee for tows that had not yet been completed. On September 26, 2022, a towing carrier, Wyatt's Towing, petitioned the Commission requesting that the Commission promulgate rules addressing House Bill 22-1314. By decision number C-22-0705, which was issued November 9th, 2022, the Commission granted Wyatt's Towing's request to initiate this rulemaking proceeding. One goal of this rulemaking proceeding is to revise the existing language in the rules to make the rules, quote, easier and less confusing for towing carriers to incorporate into their established practices and operations, end quote. To that end, the Commission convened a public stakeholder workshop on December 19th, 2022, which was attended by many members of the towing industry, at which the proposed amendments to the rules were reviewed and discussed in detail. Stakeholders at the workshop identified several topics they wished to address in this rulemaking proceeding, including 1, temporary towing permits, 2, clarification of appropriate safety and overhead lighting for tow trucks, 3, additional standards for releasing towed vehicles without full payment, and 4, clarification of Commission's jurisdiction over towing carriers engaged in motor vehicle transport. Because the Commission's rules governing towing carriers already address certain aspects of the statutory amendments, there were in existence a full set of towing rules already. Such regulations addressing towing carriers' duties with respect to care and storage of towing vehicles, the minimum and maximum towing rates, and the circumstances by which a towing carrier may non-consensually tow a motor vehicle, the Commission staff has strived to incorporate the proposed changes seamlessly into the existing rules. The resulting proposed rules endeavor to strike a balance between making necessary and appropriate changes mandated by the statutes to the rules, while maintaining the necessary operational and safety standards already required by the Commission's rules whenever possible. Throughout the process of amending the towing rules, I and Commission staff have strived to incorporate suggested changes to the towing rules while balancing the various interests of disparate stakeholders. It has been a complicated and lengthy process, but we have garnered a considerable number of comments and suggestions, for which I thank all of the participants. Depending on the complexity and the volume of comments offered today, I may continue or close the hearing. I haven't yet made that determination. I will announce my decision whether to close or continue the hearing at the conclusion of today's proceedings. All right, a few preliminary matters I need to address before we turn to the procedures we'll be following today. First, consistent with Commission practice, we are webcasting this hearing. We also have a court reporter taking down everything that's being said. Consequently, I ask all participants to please speak one at a time, speak slowly and clearly. We need to ensure that the court reporter can later prepare a complete transcript of the proceedings and that she can hear everything that's going on. Also, please be aware that the chat function normally found in Zoom has been disabled for this hearing, so do not try to make comments using the chat function. All right, let me now explain how the public comment hearing will proceed. First, you may provide written or oral comments. Written and oral comments will be given the same weight. The Commission does not give any greater weight to oral or to written comments. And in fact, the Commission prefers written comments primarily because people tend to be clearer and are more persuasive in writing than when they present comments orally. They can also be more easily reviewed at a later time. If you would prefer to submit written comments, there are 4 primary ways to submit them. A, through the Commission's electronic filing system that can be found on the Commission's website. B, through the quote, file a comment or complaint, end quote, link on the Commission's website. C, through email, or D, through snail mail, the US Postal Service. The PUC's website address is puc.gov. The Commission's email address can be found on the Commission's website. To provide a written comment in any of these 4 ways, we ask that you please include the proceeding number of this proceeding, which is 23R-0085, T as in Tom, O as in open. The Commission also accepts oral comments. In addition to providing oral comments here today during the public comment hearing, you can also leave the Commission a voicemail message with your oral comments at any time by calling 303-869-3490. Let me repeat that number in case anyone didn't get it. It's 303-869-3490. If you leave a voicemail message with your comments, please be sure to include this proceeding number, which again is 23R-0085TO. Your voicemail message comments will be transcribed and then will be placed in the record of this proceeding, and I will review them. Okay, if you are here today to provide public comment, I will now go over the steps for providing public comment during this hearing. First, if you haven't already done so, please change your Zoom name to your first and last name. And if you are here on behalf of any entity or are representing an entity, I would ask that you please also include that entity's name as part of your Zoom name. This is important so that we have a clear record and will let me know on whom I should call to speak. I ask that you use the raise hand Zoom feature to signal that you wish to speak. To do so, you click the reactions button and click raise your hand. Please leave your hand raised until you have been called on. And if you no longer wish to speak, just please lower your hand. If you do not know how to use the raise hand feature, you may instead turn on your video to signal that you wish to speak. To that end, I'm going to ask you to please remain on mute with your camera turned off until your name is called. Because like I said, I'll be using the camera signal if you turn on your video so that I know that you're ready to speak. Please also mute your microphone after you are done speaking. When you speak, please speak slowly and enunciate as well as possible. Again, only one person may speak at a time. Do not speak over one another. That's particularly true in Zoom because it gets even more garbled. We just want to ensure that our court reporter can hear and understand your comments so that an accurate record of the proceeding is captured. Also, if somebody has covered all of the points that you intended to include in your comments, please feel free during your comments to merely state that you agree with the points made by that person. If we have anyone who is participating in this hearing by phone, let me give those procedures. You will need to dial *9 on your phone to use the raise hand Zoom feature. You need to listen very carefully for your area code and the last 3 digits of your phone number. When your phone number is called, you will need to dial *6 to unmute yourself, and then you can speak and make your comments. When I call your name or phone number, please unmute and turn on your video if you have that capability. Begin your comments by stating your first and last name. When you are speaking, please remember we have a court reporter making a transcript so that everything is said is taken down. Again, as let me reiterate one more time, it's very, very important that everyone speaks slowly and clearly and not interrupt each other. The court reporter may interrupt you though if she has trouble hearing you, and she may ask you to slow down if you are speaking too quickly. To anyone who is here today who does not wish to speak or give comment and you're only here to observe, we are live streaming this hearing on our website. The link is in the bottom right corner of the website, puc.colorado.gov/webcasts. We are in hearing room B. If you are not planning to make comments today, please use the webcast to observe the hearing and leave the Zoom meeting. You are free to join back to the Zoom meeting at any time if you wish to make comments later. All right. Turning now to the evidentiary and comment portion of this hearing. I want to first state that to facilitate today's discussion, I am going to be admitting into evidence Hearing Exhibit 4. Hearing Exhibit 4 is the most recent iteration of the proposed amended towing rules and incorporates changes that were discussed at the July 25th, 2023 public comment hearing, as well as changes suggested by the Office of the Attorney General Consumer Protection Section. A copy of Hearing Exhibit 4 was attached to and filed with decision number R23-0559-I, which was issued on August 22nd, 2023. There was an errata that also went out correcting an error that was made in the decision. That errata was issued on August 24th. I will be using Hearing Exhibit 4 during this public comment hearing and will have my incredibly capable legal assistants, Casey and Stephanie, pull up sections as we discuss them and screen share them so that everyone participating in this rulemaking can see the language and the proposed changes we're discussing. Because we've already discussed a number of the proposed rules in detail, I won't be calling out for comments with respect to each rule subparagraph as I have in previous public comment hearings. However, I will allow time at the end of this public comment hearing for anyone to address any other issues pertaining to the rules that we may not have already covered, and to raise any issues that may not have already been discussed. All right, now that I've laid out all the procedures that will be followed today, let's turn to the public comment portion of the hearing. As I indicated at the beginning of the hearing, with us today are several Colorado state legislators. I believe we said we had legislator Mr. Basenecker, Senator Gonzalez, and I believe Representative Woodrow. This morning, we received a joint letter signed by those legislators. As I said, I have read it, but given the short time, I'm not prepared to respond to it today during this proceeding or during this hearing, but rest assured that it has been made part of the record and it will be taken into consideration. Turning then to the legislators, I will, before we open it up to the general public, ask the legislators if any of them wish to make public comment today during this hearing. Representative Woodrow, excuse me, I see that you've raised your hand. You may proceed if you're willing to make public comment.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Judge Hahn. Stephen Woodrow, House District 2. Thank you very much for making time for us and for being so thorough with these proceedings. It is so vital that the public have a say in this matter. Thank you for acknowledging the letter that we submitted. I apologize that it wasn't put together sooner for your honor, but it has now been signed by over 20 state representatives and at least one wonderful state senator. And I'm sure more are going to sign on once they have a chance to read it. Judge, top of the waves, we offer, and just so the public at large understands where we're coming from, we offer 3 reasons for rejecting the proposed amendments that I know a lot of time has been put into. But where we're at, Your Honor, first, these proposed amendments exceed the delegation of authority set forth in 40-10.1-410. Second, even if the proposed amendments complied with section 410, several of the provisions seek to rewrite the actual language of the statute, working hard to pass. And third, the legislature continues to review the issues in this space. We just had an interim propose some changes, and adopting these proposed amendments now via rulemaking would interfere with the legislative process. Quickly turning to my first point, Judge, the proposed rule changes fail to comply with the statutory delegation of authority set forth in 10.1410. That delegation of authority limits what the commission can do here. It states that rule changes regarding towing practices can be made upon a finding that a towing practice, in quotes, harms the public interest. The proposed changes to the rule cite section 410 as a basis for statutory authority, but make no effort to comply with its requirement of actually making a finding of harm to the public interest. This section 410 is more specific than other delegations of authority like 10.1106. It literally is found in section 400, which houses House Bill 22-1314, as opposed to the other delegation of authority, which is in the statute's general provisions. Also, disregarding section 410 would essentially render it superfluous, which certainly was not the intent of me and my colleagues. Second, even if the proposed amendments complied, Judge, with section 10.1410, they're still improper because they seek to rewrite the statute. For example, the amendments would add a provision requiring payment be made between 30 and 90 days. This is not what we passed as a deliberative body. We have discussions about what the law should be. We have public debate and we hash over and pour over every word. And we did not agree on any type of timetable, let alone 30 to 90 days. And we shouldn't be rewriting the statute through what we consider an improper use of the delegated authority. We said folks could get their cars back by completing a form and by providing, $60. We didn't say that they also have to agree to pay within 30 to 90 days. Likewise, the statute we passed, Judge, says in quotation marks that the signage these companies use have to have 3 simple words: authorized parking only. The proposed changes disregard the fact that we put these words in quotes and say that you can use or similar language. As a legislative body seeking to regulate an industry, we need to be able to say, at the very least, what 3 words a business must use in order to comply with the statute. To allow that business to then seek to rewrite those rules through proposed amendments to broaden what they're doing while interjecting uncertainty into the law, no less, is just improper, Judge, and we ask that you reject that. Third and finally, and what my colleagues will talk much more eloquently about than me, is that the legislature right now is revisiting these issues. There was an interim process this summer where testimony was heard and considered. It looks like a bill title has already been pulled. In legislative parlance, of course, we're given 5 bills, Judge, every session. Pulling a title means that we're reserving one of those bills for this issue. So at least one legislator has already done that, meaning we're going to be debating these as a legislative body this session. To pass these proposed amendments now would, in effect, sort of jostle the legal landscape that we're dealing with. So for those reasons, Your Honor, and again, with the most gratitude for and respect for holding these proceedings, we ask that you reject these amendments. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Representative Woodrow. Senator Gonzalez, you have your hand up. Would you like to speak next? Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Judge, and thank you for allowing me to speak and for giving so many members of the community this opportunity. I'd like to follow up and thank Representative Woodrow for his opening comments, and would just like to state that I, along with many of my colleagues, have submitted 2 comments during this rulemaking process. Certainly, the initial letter back in May of this year, and the letter that you are now in receipt of from just late yesterday. I took that unusual step because I was very concerned about the significant role that large towing companies are playing in altering and undermining the work that we did at the legislature on a bipartisan basis in a public manner back in 2022. And when I reviewed the initial rules this past May, they didn't seem to capture and reflect the law that my colleagues and I worked to enact in drafting. I continue to have significant concerns about the proceedings. And as Representative Woodrow shared, the Commission is attempting to change the language that we required towing carriers to place on their signs under House Bill 22-1314. We had a very specific vision on how to make that signage clear to consumers, and the Commission's attempts to create flexibility here are actually inconsistent with our intentions. And further, the Commission continues to make changes to the very simple procedure that we established for consumers wishing to utilize the $60 provision, right? Rather than just requiring the $60 in the PUC form established under statute to recover a vehicle. The Commission has added payment timelines and gone so far as to consider payment plans, neither of which we intended when we initially passed House Bill 1314. And, in so doing, through this rulemaking process here, as opposed to what I would argue would be the correct venue to do so through the legislative process, right? I think that contravenes our intentions in the drafting of the law itself. With respect and with gratitude for you, Judge, we urge the Commission to not undermine the intention of the legislature. And I thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you this morning.
Thank you so much, Senator Gonzalez. May I ask you one quick question?
Certainly.
Thank you. You pointed to the payment of the remainder of the balance. Now, reading the statute, it specifically says that a vehicle should be released after payment of $60 or 15% of the fee. Are you suggesting that it was the legislator's intent that the remainder of the balance never be paid?
Thank you for the question, Judge. I appreciate that opportunity to clarify. Our intention was always to ensure that the full amount of the towing fee be paid, but my concern in regards to the mechanism by which the draft rules here are proposed to modify, are proposed to be modified, would actually, I think, narrow and limit by saying, okay, it must be by this date, it must be in this mechanism, and for that reason, we actually had these conversations as legislators, and we wanted to make sure that that there was flexibility so that a towing operator and an individual could figure out what the best payment plan for themselves would be, and not establishing a strict regimented process and procedure. We think that, similar to any debt that is owed to any business, that a consumer should have that ability to make payments on that debt in a timely and flexible manner, and not narrow what those options may be simply because it's a towing debt that is owed.
Is there a time period that you would be comfortable with? Because if there's no time period at all, then there is no debt upon which to be collected. Because if there's no end date to a debt being owed, then that debt can never be collected in court because it's never actually due. So is there a time period that the legislators would be more amenable to?
Thank you, Judge, for the opportunity to respond. I personally have just gone through this experience myself. And
yes, I saw the news clipping about it.
Thank you. And, part of what I find to be really challenging is that different situations for different individuals may come into play, right? Some folks, and so in order to have that opportunity to discuss as a legislature, I feel like that conversation should take place within the legislature, where certainly my perspective as, say, a Denver lawmaker can be taken into account alongside, say, a rural legislator, say, alongside a suburban legislator, because recognizing that those circumstances are so different and that consumers are often very differently situated, right? I would want the opportunity to also just look at statutory construction of other debts, and to understand whether statutorily we require strict timelines in order to repay other types of consumer debt. When we contemplated the clear language of House Bill 22-1314, now codified in, I believe it was Title 40 and Title 42, that we left that silent in order to give flexibility to the towing operators and to the consumers directly to figure out a payment plan that works for them, right? In my situation, in constituents and Coloradans that I've spoken to, both when this bill was initially being drafted and also now here in the weeks and months since the law has been enacted, folks continue to really require that flexibility to figure out the right payment plan for themselves.
Thank you so much for answering my question, Senator Gonzalez. I really appreciate it. Do you have any other comments you wanted to make, or does that conclude your comments?
I'll go ahead and conclude my remarks at this time. I do appreciate the opportunity again to speak with you today.
Thank you so much, Senator Gonzalez. It's been a pleasure having you, honestly. I see Mr. Connolly's hand up. Mr. Connolly, did you want to respond to Senator Gonzalez's comments? Because if not, I would like to move on. There are other representatives and legislators on the call, and I would like to give them the opportunity because I know they're all very busy, and I would like them to be able to get their comments on before they need to depart us today. Is there
Sure.
a specific comment you wanted to make in response to Senator Gonzalez, Mr. Connolly?
Yes, there is.
Okay, please do so. And if you could keep it as brief as we can, as I see that Representative Ricks has her screen on and she's ready to make comment in just a moment.
Sure. And I understand the senator's ideas here, and this is where we were trying to get to. You got to remember, we have to stop the bad towers as well. And if you don't put a guideline of a time frame, you're going to get those things like the loan programs and wanting someone to pay by a certain time. If you don't put some kind of guidelines, they will find loopholes in that. And if there's nothing in the rules, then the commission cannot issue fines or anything else if it's not defined in the rules. That's why the timeline's been suggested of putting some kind of timeline to do two things. One, to stop bad towers from trying to make people pay within a week or two, or take, loans with interest rates and all that crap, to something that's feasible for a business to be able to have their money out for, 30 to 120 days or something. I mean, they're trying to find a happy medium. We have to be able to plug both sides of that gap. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, Mr. Connolly. I see we also have Representative Niketa Ricks with us. Am I mispronouncing your name? Please tell me if I mispronounced it.
Judge, it is Naquita Ricks. Yes,
Naquita.
that's how I pronounce it. Naquita. Yes.
Naquita.
And yes.
Thank
Good
you
morning.
so much for being here.
Thank
Welcome
you, Judge.
Please go
Thank
ahead.
you. Good morning, Judge. Back in May, I made an appearance before the PUC to also talk about the hearings and what was going on as far as the rulemaking. At that time, I expressed my concerns around the fact that the towing companies were trying to, of course, create some type of loan program out of the payment plan situation. And also we, asked that you would reject any attempts by them to charge interest to consumers as they were trying to get their car back. Today, I come back before you, and let me just state for the record, I am State Representative Naquita Ricks. I represent House District 40 in Colorado, in Aurora. And I appreciate the work that the commission has done. I continue to have reservations, though, about the direction several of those rules are going in. I fear that these proceedings, requested by the state's largest towing operator, have worked against the will of the legislature, and without further changes may undermine the work we did in 2022 legislative session. Despite this clear guidance from the legislative sponsors, the PUC has added provisions to CCR 723-6 that distort HB 221314's intent. As currently written by the PUC, 6512L3 requires that the remaining balance owed to the towing carrier shall be due no less than 30 days, but no more than 90 days after the motor vehicle has been released to the vehicle owner or authorized operator. HB 2213. Yes.
Interrupt just for a moment? Would you like
Sure.
our legal assistant to put up that provision so that everyone can see it?
Sure, why not?
It's part of hearing exhibit 4. Casey, if you
Okay.
could go ahead and pull that up. It's Rule 6512 L and subsections 1 through 4. And I'm afraid, sorry, it's a little bit far into it.
Yeah, it'll just take me a second to 6512L, you said, right?
Yes.
I believe it's on page 30, at least of the copy I have.
Okay.
A little more. Okay, perfect. And Representative Ricks, I am so sorry to have interrupted you in that manner, but I think this might make it a little bit easier for you to make your comments. We now have on the screen what is the current proposed revision to the towing rules, Rule 6512 subsection L.
So, and I, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. So despite this clear guidance from legislative sponsors, the PUC has added provisions to CCR 723-6 that distort the intent of HB 22-1314. As currently written by the PUC, 6512L3 requires that the remaining balance owed to the towing carrier should be paid no less than 30 days, but no more than 90 days after the motor vehicle has been released to the vehicle owner or authorized user operator. HB 22-1314 did not establish any payment deadline for consumers availing themselves of the $60 recovery provision. This was never debated nor discussed, and it undercuts the legislative process. We urge you to reject this rewrite of the requirements as they directly contradict the language and the spirit of the bill. Likewise, the law as passed states that a towing carrier that enters into an agreement with a property owner to non-consensually tow vehicles from the property shall post signs that state authorized parking only. And this is in subsection 40-10, 1-405F, section 3D. Contrary to this requirement, the PUC proposed amendments would allow signs to state authorized parking only or a similar statement of parking limitation or restrictions. This change creates confusion and variations where we intended none to exist and allows towing companies to create ambiguity for consumers. I ask that the PUC reconsider the rules I've mentioned. These proceedings and the proposed rules coming out of them contradict the work that we did in the legislative session in 2022 and potentially compromise work we'll be doing next session. So, Your Honor, I'm asking that these particular sections of the rulemaking be reconsidered and that you reject any of those rules because they are not within the spirit and the intent of our legislation.
Thank you so much, Representative Ricks. May I ask you just one quick question? If a
Yes.
sign said something to the effect of no unauthorized parking, which means the same as authorized parking only, would that not be acceptable to you? The only language that it should say is authorized parking only. So if it said no unauthorized parking, that's not okay?
I mean, as long as there's no ambiguity, but I would say authorized parking only so we know what areas are authorized and what are not. So if there's, I think that's clear if you're very intentional and direct, authorized parking only.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for, I appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Okay. Representative Basnicker, you have some comments you'd like to share with us as well.
Yes, thank you, Judge Hahn. I appreciate the opportunity and certainly appreciate the deliberation that this body has been tasked with undertaking. I'm here to express concern about the proceedings and several of the rules that are being contemplated by the PUC. As I'm sure we are all aware, there has been tremendous consumer feedback about the behavior and practices that are well documented at this point of non-consensual towing operators. This has led to changes in the composition of the towing task force, the unusual move of the Colorado's Attorney General confirming the investigation, and intense public scrutiny of large towing operators in the press. Concern about the behavior of the non-consensual towing companies has led the Transportation Legislation Review Committee to begin work during the interim on a bill to further regulate carriers operating in Colorado. We had the non-consensual towing industry and the towing industry more broadly come before us in June. And then this month we received drafting approval for a bill that takes on many of the issues being addressed here. We further believe that action is necessary and much needed to protect consumers and to bring industry in line with national best practices. Given the work of that ongoing interim committee on which I am a member, I'd urge the PUC to avoid making rules that conflict, as I understand it, with the clear language of House Bill 22-1314. This includes rules currently under consideration that would relax the language allowed on signs upon which a comma can change the meaning entirely. And I think it's absolutely appropriate that the language suggested by the legislature be adopted writ large, and requiring specific payment timelines under the affordability program created under state law. To that point, and to dovetail a bit on the conversation that seems to be happening here, the conversation seems to assume that the balance on a non-consensual tow that has been retrieved for the $60 or 15% would never actually be due, when I would suggest that an interpretation consistent with this body's intent and clear reading of statute would be that the balance is due at the time the vehicle is picked up, and the non-consensual tower already has mechanisms and measures for relief in place, including sending a bill, making a phone call to the vehicle owner, and then filing. This is the current practice that they currently use to recoup any outstanding for which by which a vehicle is retrieved due to the provisions of 1314. So I would view a 30-day or a 90-day window to be unnecessary, and it would necessarily conflict with the intent of this body, as nothing of that $60 or 15% assumes that the balance is then never due at a point future. The balance is due, the vehicle is simply retrieved for those $60 or 15% fees as noted in statute. So consideration of these and other provisions go beyond, as I understand it, the statutory authority of this body and potentially contradict the work we're already doing in the legislature to further regulate the towing industry. We'd ask for forbearance from this body as we continue to work to design policies that reflect both the will of the legislature and the best interest of consumers in our state. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Basnicker. Mr. Valentine. Well, first of all, before I turn to you, Mr. Valentine, are there any other legislators with us today? I only know of you four. If there are any others here who wish to make a comment, please do so now. No? Okay. Mr. Valentine, you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Judge Hahn. I just am trying to understand what the representatives are proposing as far as this rulemaking is concerned, because there's been some suggestion, I think, and I don't want to misunderstand this, that the commission stop this rulemaking period and wait until additional legislation is passed. And I just want to be sure that that's the suggestion, or that it's not the suggestion, because I think it's important that the industry have guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Valentine. Representative Woodrow, you have your hand raised. Would you like to go ahead and speak?
Yeah, sure. I'll just address that, Judge. Our preference would be that the court either strike down the proposed amendments or hit pause on the proceedings to give the legislature space. We've gone through and explained that we believe the proposed rules exceed the delegation of authority. But even if the court weren't to accept that, we've pointed out several instances where the proposed rules are inconsistent or contrary to legislative intent. So yeah, we would ask that the court either strike down the rules or hit pause on the proceedings. And I'm so sorry, Judge. I have a dishwasher coming into the house at the moment, and that's why I'm home today. My wife is working, so I just have folks coming in. I apologize if there's noise in the background.
I am not hearing worries. Thank you, though.
Okay.
No worries. All right. Any other comments from legislators who would like to speak before we dive into the remainder of the public hearing? All right. I want to thank all the legislators for your comments. Please rest assured your comments are part of the record in this proceeding and will be taken into consideration. Let me just reiterate that the scope of this rulemaking proceeding is to implement the statutory amendments made in House Bill 22-1314 and to update the existing towing rules to comply and comport with the current statutory provisions. Please understand that this rulemaking is not set in stone, and rules can be amended further if need be. So this is not necessarily the end of this process. I want you to understand that, but that the scope of it is to implement the statute as it currently exists, which did include a provision mandating and directing the commission to adopt these rules. Turning then to the general public comment portion, I wanted to first specifically address one provision that has been amended since the July 25th, 2023 public comment hearing. That is Rule 6512(1L) subsection 4, which is the rule that was previously up on the screen shared by my legal assistant. Casey, if you could go ahead and please put that back up. Subsection Roman numeral 4 was amended a bit from the prior public comment hearing at the request of the Office of the Attorney General. This current iteration is a version that the Consumer Protection section of the Attorney General's office suggested. It currently states that, quote, a towing carrier must strictly comply with this rule and shall not impose any additional obligations or requirements as a condition of releasing a motor vehicle on the vehicle owner or the authorized operator. As I stated, this is a further amendment from the language proposed in decision number R23-05-02, which was issued August 2nd. Subsection 4 was, Roman numeral 4 was added to address concerns expressed about the potential for towing carriers to require authorized operators to sign compulsory loan agreements for the tow balance before releasing a vehicle, or by requiring additional documentation or procedures before they would release a vehicle. The Attorney General's office suggested the language be flipped to simply state that nothing could be required except for the form and the statutory minimum payment. We did not receive any written responsive comments to the AG's written proposal or the further proposed changes to the rule. So I'm asking now whether anyone has any verbal comments they'd like to make now about the proposed changes to Rule 6512(1L) Roman numeral 4. I see Mr. Newman has turned his camera on. If you'd go ahead and introduce yourself and make your comments. Thank you.
Hey, Judge Hahn, good to see you again. My name is Zach Newman from the Community Economic Defense Project. And I just wanted to express appreciation for this rule. Think this is very important. We do a number of towing intakes every day, and a very common phenomenon that we're seeing with the large non-consensual towers is folks being told, you know, a manager has to approve this. They wait an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours for the manager. They're told to come back the next day because a manager might be around. And I think hopefully this rule, if implemented, will address some of that, because we are seeing the large carriers implement barriers to slow down people as they attempt to access the $60 or 15% provision. So a lot of support for the rule and appreciate its inclusion.
Thank you so much, Mr. Newman. Does anyone else have any comments? Mr. Connolly, I see your hand up. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And again, if you could introduce yourself for the record.
Yes, John Conley, President of the Towing and Recovery Professionals of Colorado. With the comments from the legislators and going off that rule, Roman numeral 3, would it be easier to put the balance owed, the owner shall be given a minimum of 90 days? And that way it's, what I'm trying to do is we got to close the gap with towers saying, oh, there's no rules that stop me from charging you by next Tuesday. You got to pay me in 3 days. Or if you had a minimum that said that it was owed, you got to have something that you got to remember, there's a lot of legit towers out here that are trying to run a business every day, that are trying to stay within the boundaries of the rules. And if you don't put boundaries of some kind there's going to be a mess. So maybe instead of saying not less than 30 days, no more than 90, if you said the owner has a minimum of 90 days, that way you stop some towers from trying to charge early, and then it says that they have a minimum of 90 days, and then a minimum of 90 doesn't mean that it can't go over that 120 or 6 months, depending on a case by case on whatever hardship that person's going through. I think that might be an option for that.
Thank you, Mr. Connolly. I appreciate that comment and that suggestion. Does anyone else have any comments about 6512-1L4 or Mr. Connolly's comments? No? Okay. As I stated at the beginning, hearing exhibit 4 is a further revised version of the proposed towing rules. This was provided as an attachment to decision number, oh, I don't have it, 559, I believe, which was issued last week. It is a complete version of the proposed towing rules and the changes provided in their entirety. So it incorporates changes that were proposed in decision numbers R23-0354I, R23-0393-I, and R23-0502-I, as well as the changes which were just discussed and which were proposed by the Attorney General's office. I would like to ask whether anyone has any comments about hearing exhibit 4 and the proposed rules as they're provided in their entirety. In other words, does anyone have anything else to say about the changes that we've made or the proposed changes to the rules thus far? No? Okay. Oh, Mr. Newman.
I'm so sorry, my my camera was not cooperating. Thank you, Judge Hahn. And again, Zach Newman from the Community Economic Defense Project. I would just reiterate, our impression regarding the provision about, authorized towing and the signage. I believe the members of the state legislature have already commented on that, so I won't repeat what they've said, but would just share our organization's sense that we would prefer the language and just the language that is in quotes in state law be reflected in the administrative code.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. That comment will be taken into consideration and I appreciate you making it. Does anyone else have any comments about that? Okay. Next, I just want to ask whether there's any provisions that we have that anyone wishes to discuss that we haven't specifically discussed or addressed already today. Are there any issues that we haven't yet discussed that anyone would like to address? I'm going to open up the floor to anyone else wishing to make a comment about any provision that we haven't already discussed. Okay, I don't see any hands up. Next, I just want to ask whether there's anyone who has any additional anecdotes they would like to share. In prior public comment hearings, we had some participants from the public who disclosed and discussed the experiences they've had with the towing carriers. I didn't know whether there was anyone here today who wishes to provide us with similar anecdotes. If you do, please, this is your opportunity to do so. Okay. I don't see anyone. Okay. It appears that we've don't have any other additional public comments that anyone wishes to make. Given that, oh, Mr. Valentine, you just raised your hand.
I did, Your Honor. I guess I'm maybe jumping the gun here a bit. I'm wondering about the timing of further proceedings. I know that you're going to decide whether we need another public hearing or not, but I would like to ask for at least 30 days so that we can review the comments that were submitted over the last couple of days to come up with some language that might take care of some of the legislators' concerns, because I understand where they're coming from and their desire to maybe come up with a way to have new legislation mesh seamlessly and so forth and so on. So that would be a request that I would have. Thank you.
So your request is not to close the proceedings, but to have one more public comment hearing. And
Well, and I don't know that you need to have another public comment hearing, but I would like at least the opportunity to provide written comments.
And I will say, Mr. Valentine, even if I decide to close the proceeding, the hearing today, it's not closing the proceeding.
Okay,
So
thank you.
And you are always free to provide additional written comments. And I will address that. So, you know, as long as they're received in a fairly timely fashion, I should be able to consider them in any decision.
Yes, just don't want to have the hearing closed before we have a chance to review. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Valentine. I don't see anyone else interested in making any comments. I'm going to ask that we just take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll probably come back and wrap up. But I just want to review my notes a little bit and make a determination whether we need to continue it or close the hearing as of today. So if we could take a quick 5-minute break until 12:36, and then we'll come right back on the record. Thank you all. Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience. I apologize for being a little bit late returning. The computer kicked me off. So hopefully you can all hear me and I'm back on the record. All right. Thank you again to everyone who has participated in the public comment hearing thus far. Before I go into my concluding statements, I'm just going to ask whether anyone has any additional comments they would like to make. Please speak now. Okay, I don't see anyone. It appears that no one else has any comments and that we've therefore reached the end of the public comment portion of this hearing. I want to thank you all again for your comments regarding the proposed modifications to the rules governing the towing industry and the legislation we need to implement, House Bill 22-1314. I would note that it sounds likely that there will be additional legislation that will be introduced in the 2014 legislative session, further amending the applicable statutes. But given those factors and the need to implement changes to the towing rules and the need to follow the mandate issued in House Bill 1314, I will not be continuing this hearing further. Please note that although the hearing portion will be closing, interested persons are still free to submit additional written comments or to leave additional verbal comments on the Commission's voicemail. There is no deadline for submitting written comments, and comments will be accepted until this proceeding is closed. As I indicated, I'll be closing the hearing. That does not close the proceeding. The proceeding continues until the rules are implemented and adopted. We just won't be having another public comment hearing at which comments can be taken. Mr. Valentine, you have your hand up. Do you have a question?
Yeah, there's still a bit of uncertainty for me. Yes, technically the proceeding goes on until the commission issues a final decision and rules are adopted, and I understand that, but what we would like is some guidance from Your Honor as to how we, a deadline by which you would like comments submitted so that you would consider them as part of the record for your recommended decision.
Thank you, Mr. Valentine. I know I'm taking a long time, but I was getting to that. As I indicated at the beginning of the hearing, all written comments will be added to the record of the proceeding, and all verbal messages left with the commission regarding the towing rules will be transcribed and filed with the record of this proceeding. I will be reviewing all of those written comments. And I would quickly remind anyone that wishing to submit further written comments or verbal comments to please ensure that their message or written comment includes this proceeding number 23R-0085TO. As Mr. Valentine alluded to, I would ask that while there is no set deadline for submitting written comments, I'm going to caution anyone who is interested in providing written comments to please do so within the next 2 weeks. So today is August 31st. I would ask that we receive any comments by September 15th at the latest, if at all possible. Any later than that, and they might not be received in time for me to give them full consideration in any decision I issue. It is my hope to issue a decision in this proceeding within the next 30 days or so, but it is difficult for me to say precisely when that decision will issue. Regardless, if comments are received long after that time period or too close to that deadline, it is unlikely that I'll be able to give them full consideration when I make my decision. So therefore, as I indicated, I would ask that anyone wishing to make additional written comments in response to anything that you heard today or anything that's been received by the commission in the last few weeks, to please do so no later than September 15th, 2023. Again, Friday, September 15th, 2023 is the deadline by which I would ask that you provide comments if at all possible. Although, as I indicated, anything received after that will be made part of the record. It just might not be given full consideration in my decision. Again, thank you everyone for participating. This has been a long process and a complicated proceeding. This brings this public comment hearing in proceeding number 23R-0085 to a close. Thank you all for participating. This concludes the hearing in proceeding number 23R-0085TO. Thank you all and have a good afternoon.